All right, let's talk about hub and spoke patterns. Hub and spoke patterns have been around for a long time. They are not new at all. But because so many people have grown up in the last 10 years, primarily working on web applications and specifically state-based web applications, ASP.NET MVC, and then just adding dynamicness to the UI with Angular and React, that hub and spoke patterns are not as common as they probably should be. But in past decades, where desktop software, where native software kind of ruled the roost, hub and spoke patterns were in every single one of them. They were everywhere. And dynamic UI eventing, which we'll talk about later, was in everywhere. So Blazor is bringing the feel of a rich native application to the web world. And now I will admit, there were some segment of people doing React JavaScript applications and Angular JavaScript applications that are also applying this. But again, not the majority of them. So a hub and spoke pattern essentially is a type of abstraction where calling code is going to send data or send a message, send a class, send an object into a hub, into a hub class, a class that has a responsibility for representing the abstraction of a particular wheel, if you will, hub and spoke. And then there are multiple implementations of that abstraction. Abstraction equals interface in C# terms. And then there's a little bit of routing logic that the hub owns to look at the object that is sent in and decide which spoke to send the object to, or which multiple spokes to send the object to. And sometimes the hub will be a broker and it will decide, it will have the intelligence. And sometimes it'll just be a dumb distributor where it will have the object and it'll go around to all of its spokes, and which are classes, and say, do you want this object? Do you want this object? Can you handle this object? Would you like this object? And whichever ones say, yes, give it to me, then it passes it along. So those are two styles. But the calling code, you end up with a single API. And this API, it's just a C# in-memory API. And about halfway down in this code, you see bus.send. Bus is a very common pattern name for a style of hub and spoke pattern. And bus kind of signifies that you send an object down a pipeline and all the spokes are kind of attached and all of them get a chance to speak about it. So a bus is not a broker. A bus is the second style where the spokes decide if they want it or not. Okay, a broker is a different type of hub and spoke where the broker chooses whether to give a spoke a chance. All right, so that's the little semantic differences. And so from the calling code in your Blazor application, to get deeper down into the application, you don't have to have lots of different method calls that you know about. You have one, bus.send. And what do you send? You send three things. You either send a query, which is a request for some data. You send a command, which is an order to do something. Or you send an event, which is just a notification that something happened. And so it really compartmentalizes the user interface of your Blazor application and makes things really, really clean, because you can have your Blazor application on top of, with the bus as a conduit into the rest of the application. And then you just have some routing to the handlers of these particular queries or commands or events. Now, from a concrete perspective, I like to advocate making your own hub and spoke pattern. However, you don't have to do all of the implementation yourself. I really like one particular library, and that's called the Mediator library. And Jimmy Bogard is the maintainer of it. And actually, I interviewed him on the Azure DevOps podcast. We worked together on a project way back in 2008 and 2009. And out of that project, he kind of got the inspiration, and that became Mediator. The pattern was kind of, and he's really taken it really far. But that library has has all of the implementation of routing and full support for generics and everything like that. And then what I like to do is take that library, wrap it with another class so that you have a seam or a joint over that library, and then you don't have to do the full implementation of your hub and spoke pattern because you have some help. And that goes for so many libraries out there that do really, really interesting things. And you just wrap the library with your own class. You simplify the API down to maybe the 10% of the library that you actually need for the application. And then your application talks to your wrapper instead of letting the fact that library is used kind of be known throughout the whole application. That's also a good practice. So let's look at what my wrapper, my favorite type of wrapper, looks like. It's an implementation of an iBus interface, and there's two things: send and publish. I can send a query, I can send a command, or I can publish an event. Send is one-to-one, single send to a one handler, and publish is single send to as many handlers that want to know that thing happened. And then the method kind of does some instrumentation around it, maybe does some caching, and then delegates to the mediator library. And in publish, you can also do some interesting routing. One of the patterns that we found really useful in the Blazor space, where we need multiple Blazor users to be notified in real time, like the auction case, publishing events across all of the different servers and then across all of the users that were using the application was important. So whereas normally you might publish an event and all of the code that happens to be living in the current web server memory space get a chance at that, if we route it to mediator, but then also route it to SignalR, well, now any of the users who are using Blazor who happen to be tied to any number of our web servers that are out there get a chance to receive notifications. So it becomes really intelligent, but the sender of a notification doesn't have to know how complex the routing is. They just know, hey, this thing happened. Everybody needs to know. And then under the covers, we can handle that routing.